Hi, and welcome to part 4 of this managing Active Directory with PowerShell. In the last video, we've seen how to manage users. We've also seen how to manage OUs and create our forest. So the only thing really left for us to manage in our Active Directory is our AD groups. Since we aren't looking at managing computers in this series, the only thing left is groups. So security groups and distribution lists. So we're going to be mostly focusing on security groups, but you would manage the distribution lists in a very similar fashion. And then we're also going to be looking at automating these in our project at the end of this series. So what I did in between the last video and right now is in my Toronto OU, I have a test user, and in my New York OU, I also have a test user, just test user 2 in this case. Those are the only two. I want at least two test users in this case, just for us to be able to manage the groups and put people in, take people out, and see who's in it and see who's not. So let's get started here with groups. So the first thing that we need to do with Active Directory groups is, of course, we need to be able to create one. So again, I'm going to be going over the two different ways to create them with the commandlet, just the commandlet in one line, and then we're going to be looking at the hash table once again. So what we can do here is just new dash AD group, which is going to give us a new Active Directory group. And then we can fill in the name property, which we're just going to name this test group for now. And then we can give it a description. This group has access to drive X. So basically what security groups are often used for is to basically give different rights to different drives or different spots, different FTP locations, different mapped drives, different network locations, access to do different things. So you would definitely use these groups in quite bigger organizations. Definitely in smaller organizations, you might manage the permissions of files and folders with just the users. I personally would not recommend that. I would always recommend using a group. This way, if that person leaves, you can just remove them from the group, and it's a lot easier to then just know who has access to what, especially if you have a really good description on the group. So what we're going to want to do next is give a SAM account name, which is going to be the basically like the almost like a username for the group. So we're just going to give that test group. I often like to keep the name and the SAM account name pretty much the same, unless if the name is very long, then I like to kind of use an acronym for the SAM account name. And then what we can do is we can do a group category. So this is where you're going to get the distribution and the security group options. So in our case, we are going to pick security group. And then there is also group scope, which here you get domain local, global, and universal. These pretty much only affect you if you have like child domains and multiple domains. We're going to be picking global, but if you do have like child domains and you'd want to add people into the group from the different domains and subdomains, you would definitely you would make it a universal group. So let's pick global here. And this is pretty much all we really need because we don't need very many other things. Of course, you can always specify a path if you want to put it in a specific OU. We are just going to create them in the default users OU. I have seen people create OUs called security groups and distribution list respectively, and then put the respective type of groups in those OUs. It is really kind of up to you. I just keep them in the users OUs. That's where Microsoft puts all the groups by default. So that's kind of where I'm going to stick them in here for now. So let's go and create this group here. So we have the group created. So let's go into users here, which we have our test group right here. We see our description. We see our group scope, which is global. You also have universal. You can also change the group type here. We can see that the members is nothing. It is empty. There is no one that belongs to this group. You can also look at member of. So a nice thing that you can do with groups is you can actually what's called nest the group. So you can make a group a member of another group. And then so let's say you have a group, a parent group and a child group. That child group, if it belongs to the parent group, will have access to everything that the parent group has access to as well. So it could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing, depending on the scenario. There's also other scenarios with distribution lists. In order to avoid, if you already know that you have, let's say, an administration OU, and then you have or an administration distribution list, and you have all these other distribution lists, but all of them are meant for positions that administrate. You could just put those groups in that distribution list, and if you already manage those distribution lists automatically, you don't have to manage that extra distribution list. It'll just have those child groups, and then when you send an email to that administration list, it'll go down to the child distribution list and then go to the people that the emails need to go to. So those are some different things that might have been kind of a convoluted example, but we can look at different types of nesting later on. So let's go ahead and let's create another group, but this time we are going to do it with a hash table. So once again, we just do the group data, and then we are just going to initiate our group here. So we can put name, description, Sam, account name. And then I have to remember the spelling, group category, and group scope. I think that's how you would, yes. And then group scope. All right, perfect. So let's put the name here for, let's put this to IT group, and this will be group for all of IT. And then we can do a SAM account name. We can just do it IT group. And then the group category is going to be a security. And then the group scope is going to be global. Perfect. That seems all good. And we're going to have our new AD group commandlet, and we are going to go ahead and we are going to pass that group data. And then we should now see our IT group right here. Perfect. So we do see it. We have our description. We have all of our stuff right there. That is perfect. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to be able to get these groups and be able to perform actions on them. So some of the actions that we're going to want to do is definitely we're going to want to add users to these groups. We're going to want to remove users from these groups. And we might want to see what member of that group is from, so we can see if that group belongs to other groups, which could be very, very handy. So let's pull our group. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable called group, and we are going to do get AD group. And then what we're going to do is we can do it either by identity in this case, or we can do it by filter. Let's do it by filter in our case, and let's do name equals test group. And then what we can do is we can do the properties, and we can do a star to get us all the properties. Because by default, if I just run this part here, we can actually see that we get very, very limited subset of properties, whereas if we run with the properties star, once again, we can see that we get a lot more properties. So let's stick with that for now here. So let's get that. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to add a member to the group. So what we're going to do is we are going to add the test user one to the test group. So what we're going to do is going to do add AD group member, and we're going to do the identity is going to be group, and then the member, or members, I should say. Now you can either pass in one user or you can pass in a array of users. We are just going to be doing one user for now, but you could pass in an array of users. That is definitely possible. So what we want to do is we want to add in a test user one. So what we can do is we can do it this way, which will work. So if we just do this here and we go into our group and into members, we do see our test user, and it is test user one. So that does work. Now, the only thing is, now this is like a manually typed, there's no variables there. Could definitely lead to some errors. And this is where we're going to see with our script, our project that we're making, our script that we're making to automate these, we're going to be using variables here. So what I would be doing typically, just to avoid issues, is going to be a user and then get AD user here. And then we can do, yeah, let's just do identity in this case. And we're going to do test user one. In most cases, if you're managing this through a script and your users and you're using an employee file, you would get it and filter it based on an employee ID, kind of similarly to how we managed our users in our automating Active Directory users playlist, which is it's still going to be in the description down below. If you guys haven't checked that out, I definitely highly recommend you guys checking that out. So if we do this here and we do user, and then all we want to do here is actually, let me just, since we haven't shown you how to do this yet, we're just going to remove the user from the group, and we are going to do this. And now if I look at the group once again, we will see that test user is back in there. So this is definitely the way that I would preferably do it, is getting the user, getting the group, and then you can do it very properly there. Now, of course, we need to be able to remove the group members, but we can't really remove the group member if we don't know who's in there. So there's actually a few different ways to see who is a member of the group. So the first way um, is going to be get AD group. And then we're just going to actually copy this whole line here. And then if we run this here, we can actually see member. We can see our user in here. Now, this isn't very much the nicest way to see it. It works, but it is definitely not great. So we can see members here as well. And we can see members of here as well, which we will be taking a look at in just a little bit. So it's not the greatest way to do it. I would recommend if you're looking for getting um, the AD group members, there is a commandlet for it called get AD group member, and then we can just do identity and then pass in the group here. And we can just do get AD group member, and that will actually pass us back the entire AD user object. So that becomes very, very good. And then you can store this into a variable, parse it, get more information on that user, and be able to do a lot more. So what we could do here is get just users, and we're just going to call it users in group. And then what we can do is we can actually do, now you'd be able to do this with a pipe as well, but we can just do for each user in users in group. And then what we can do is remove AD group member. Identity is going to be group. And then the member is going to be user. And then if we do this here and we go into the test group, that should be empty now. Theory, as long as this worked out really well. There you go. So that worked. So we get this prompt. Now again, with any remove or deletion, we've always seen that we get this prompt and we already know how to escape this prompt. It's going to be the dash confirm and then false. So if we run this again here and we go into our test group, we no longer see the user. So we can easily remove, we can easily see who's in the group, we can easily remove who's in the group as well. And we can remove specific people with um, the compare object commandlet we've seen before. So if we compare who needs to be in the group, who needs to leave the group, we can figure out who needs to be added, who needs to be removed, and then the other ones just don't have to be touched. So this is all super easily doable, and I'm going to be going over all of those steps in that project video. That project video is going to be done over multiple videos. I'm going to be going in super in-depth detail. In our managing users video, we worked with a CSV file. What I'm going to be doing in this one is I'll be working with the CSV file for the employees. We're going to try to find that exact same CSV file. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work with an XML file for the mapping of groups, hopefully. I really want to use a different file format. Just this way we can play around with the most file formats as possible. Because I have another plan for the JSON file format later on for another video idea, but I feel like the XML would be a very cool way to do this one. I've already managed a couple of groups in Active Directory with some XML files, so I do believe that it is a really good tool for that. So we found out how to remove an AD group member, how to add an AD group member. So what we need to do now is we need to be able to see if a group is part of another group. So let's first see how we can add a group to another group. So it's actually super, super easy. It's very, very similar to adding a user. So let's just create a variable called group here in group 2. So group 2 should be IT, which thought I named it IT. Oh, IT group. So once we have these two groups set up here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the group, the test group, into IT group. So what we want to do is we want to do add AD group member, and we're going to do identity, which is going to be group 2, because this is the group that we want to add a member to. And then the member that we want to add is going to be group. And then if we actually run this line here, and we go into our IT group, we can see that test group is actually in there. And if we go into our test group, we can actually see IT group. So I'm going to go over the example that I went a little bit earlier. Now, if these were distribution lists, if you had sent an email to IT group, it would go to anybody that's in the IT group directly, but also to anyone that's in the test group. So that's a really, really cool feature. And the other functionality is that let's say we're dealing with the security groups. Now we have a folder that is only accessible by test group, and we have a folder that's only accessible by the IT group. The test group actually in this scenario actually would have more rights because the test group is also belongs to the IT group. So the test group would actually get all the permissions that the IT group gets and its own group because it's inside the IT group, whereas the IT group would only have the IT group permissions. It does not belong to test group, so it would not be able to access that folder that test group can access. So that's kind of where the nesting comes in. So you definitely want to make sure that you're nesting the right groups in that right order, depending on what you want to achieve. It is definitely really, really important to get that knowledge in there for those types of groups. So I think that that covers pretty much it. Now we could see who is the member of. So if we do, um, again, our test group here, and we look at the variable here, we can actually see the member of is the IT group. So we can see what groups it is a member of. It's a little bit uglier than the get AD group member. There is a little trick to that. So if we just do group dot member of, so if we just do this here, we can actually see that we get that group. So what we can do is we can do parent groups equals that. And then what we can do is we can do for each group in parent groups. I believe that you can do this here. So if we just do, I think that we can do that. I believe I could be wrong there. Yep, it does actually work. So basically, if you wanted to get the group, once you get all the members of, you could pass them into a for each loop, get the group, get some details. You can do a whole bunch of data analysis or reporting on that to be able to get all the groups that it's a member of, be able to give that in like a report to someone who's asking, hey, can you give me a report of all the groups that this group belongs to? Um, you can easily give that access or give that report to. Now, the last thing that we want to do is how to remove a group. So let's say we didn't need the group anymore. We just want to delete it. We can easily do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the IT group, which is actually not going to delete the test group, even though the test group is in there, but it's going to remove that member. So let's just do a remove AD group. And all we need to do is pass in the group that we want to delete here. So if I just copy paste this right before it, so we have our group equal to IT group, and we are going to remove it. And oops, it would help if I spell it properly, but also do that properly. And again, we get the prompt here. So we are just going to go ahead and do our confirm :false. And we run that and we get the group, which is going to be deleted now. We only have our test group. And as we can see, it's no longer a member of the IT group. So that covers all the groups. In the next video, I'm actually going to be going over a very specific part of group management. It is called privileged access management. So you're definitely going to want to keep an eye out for that. Um, most of these videos you can fully use in Windows Server 2012, R2, Server 2016, and Server 2019. The next video that I'm about to go into is definitely only for Server 2016 and higher, because that's when the feature came out with Server 2016. And it just gives some extra added features to group management. I'm not going to go too much into detail to ruin that video, but definitely keep an eye out, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell to be notified when the next video comes out, and I will see you on the next video.